Hello, let me ask you a question. How good are you at doing what you are told to do, especially if it's something you don't like doing, by maybe your mum and dad or a teacher at school? How do you like it? Hey, Josh.
What?
Go tidy your room. Yeah, you see, he didn't like that. He didn't like that. Hey, Josh, come back.
What?
Josh, go do your homework. Yeah, maybe that's how you feel when you're asked to do your homework. Hey, Josh, come back.
What?
Come back. Did you finish your broccoli at lunchtime? Could you go and have your broccoli? Go on, go have your broccoli. Yeah. It's not good, is it? When you're asked to do something that you don't like doing. But what if God asked you to do something that you really, really didn't want to do? Well, in our children's groups this morning, we are all thinking about one story where that exact thing happened. So Abraham had a son called Isaac, and you might remember the story where Abraham and Sarah had to wait years and years for their son to be born. God had promised them they'd have one, they just had to wait a long time. So when Isaac was born, you can imagine how delighted they were, how thrilled they were to finally have their little boy. But then God asks them to do something horrifying. God asks Abraham to make a sacrifice. Now, that wasn't particularly unusual because in the Old Testament, people used to make sacrifices all the time. They used to sacrifice animals to say sorry to God for the things they've done wrong. When Jesus was born, he became the sacrifice for all of us, so we don't need to do it anymore. But in the Old Testament before Jesus, that's what they used to do. So Abraham built an altar. So I'm going to do some building. And I'm not going to build an altar, but I'm going to build a tower. Can you see I've got 5 bricks? They're all different types of bricks. I've got a big green one, and then a smaller yellow one, and then an even smaller purple one, and then a smaller blue one, and then a little blue stickle brick. Can you see? Now, if I was going to build a tower out of these 5 bricks, which one should I start with? The smallest one? Or the biggest one? Or one of the bricks in the middle? I think I should start with the biggest one, don't you? So let's see if we can build our tower. So if we go the biggest one first, and then the next biggest one, and then the next biggest one, and then this one, oh, and then the stickle brick, and that should hold. There! See? A tower. Big at the bottom, small at the top. That's the way to make it stand up. Abraham built an altar rather than a tower, which was where he used to do the sacrificing. And then God told him he had to sacrifice his son. Not an animal, but Isaac, the boy he'd been waiting for. Can you imagine how Abraham would have felt about that? Can you imagine how Isaac would have felt about that? Just as Abraham is about to kill his own son, God says, stop! And gives him an animal instead. Now that's a horrifying story in a way, isn't it? But what we have to remember is that God was never going to let Abraham kill Isaac. God was never going to let Abraham kill Isaac, but he wanted to find out whether God was still the most important thing in Abraham's life. Whether God was first in Abraham's life. So, think about our tower. Building our tower, which one do we have to start with? The biggest one. The biggest one has to go first. And for Abraham, the biggest thing in his life was God. So God had to go first. And then everything else can go on top of it. And Abraham proved that by being willing to do whatever God asked him to. What if, as is the case for some of us, the smallest, most unimportant things in our life are the things we put first? Well then, let's try and build a tower now. Oh, doesn't work. Abraham knew that whatever God asked him to do, he was big and he came first. Well, God is never going to ask you to do anything like that. Don't worry about it. A bit later in the Old Testament, when God gives us the 10 Commandments, he says, do not murder. So don't worry. That's never going to happen to you. But I think God maybe sometimes does ask us whether we'd be willing to give stuff up for him, stuff that we really enjoy. It's Lent at the moment, isn't it? It's just started this week. So maybe you have given something up for Lent. I wonder how good we are at giving up the things we love. Josh, come here.
What?
Got a question for you. If God asked you to, maybe for Lent, would you be willing to give up your Nintendo Switch? Oh, no? Bit too hard. All right, let's try something else. Maybe this is a bit easier. If God asked you to, would you be willing to give up your mobile phone? Mobile phone. Willing to give up the phone? No, that's too hard too. Okay, something a bit easier than that. Would you be willing, if God asked you, to give up broccoli? Yes, you'd be happy to give up broccoli, right? God's not going to ask you to give up broccoli. Go away. But maybe God does sometimes ask us to do a little bit less of the things that take up all of our time, a little bit less of the things that seem to be most important to us, so we can make space for him, so we can put him first in our lives. So maybe we need to ask God to help us with that. Ask God to show us what are the things we should do a little bit less of, what are the things we should do a little bit more of, and how can we put him first in our lives. Have a great week. Bye.